if you will. And we're continuing on our series that we thought we wrapped up 4 times now. The adaptations to film. And the thing is that I feel bad because it's actually a really important one. Stage to film. So,
it's actually probably one of the most important ones since that's the original context.
Right. So yeah, we're talking stage to film adaptations. Like DJ just said, it is probably one of the most important adaptations that happened. It's the first one, really. The vast majority of old films are from stage plays. They just took and imposed a stage play on the camera.
Yep.
So examples of that are like Dracula 1931, Frankenstein 1931, Casablanca, 12 Angry Men.
Yep.
Those are all literally just stage plays that they've adjusted slightly to put into a cinematic experience. But it's also a thing that continues on to this day. In the last year, there was The Color Purple, What Happens Later, Waitress the Musical, which ironically is actually a stage adaptation of a movie.
Yep.
That they put back on the stage.
Well, what's the Mean Girls?
Yeah.
Was a film that got turned into a stage play that then got turned into a movie version of the stage play.
Yeah.
So full circle.
Full circle. And like Mean Girls just released this year. And then at the end of the year, we have Wicked Part 1, which is huge Broadway play that's coming on to a movie in November, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's big, huge. And the thing is that stage to film have received some of the highest praises possible for film. Films like Amadeus, The Sound of Music, 12 Angry Men, My Fair Lady, all considered classics.
Yep.
But then at the same time,
a lot of Rodgers and Hammerstein's period, like King and I was stage play. All of that stuff was all stage plays turned into films.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you have the highest of the highs, but also like with stage plays, you have the lowest of the lows. Like we mentioned earlier, What Happens Later. It's an awful film.
I think there's a problem in general with that idea is there's very little middle ground with that. It either does really well or poorly because of how, because generally speaking, and it makes sense. Only your best plays that do well are going to get turned into movies. Bad plays probably aren't going to get turned into films unless they think it would be better that way. So only popular ones are going to get made. So they're going to do really well unless the medium of film doesn't suit it well.
Right. Or they do a poor job
or they
adapt it poorly.
Yeah,
they adapt it poorly. So we're going to talk a lot about what makes a good stage play, what makes a bad stage. Well, not stage play, but stage to film.
Yeah.
And a bad stage
This will follow. It's been a while since we've done one of these, but it'll follow a lot of the other ones that we did. Because we did, book to film, comics to film. All this.
Video games
to film. And so there's a lot of similarities here. But this one's a little different because it's like the original, films stage play kind of adapted into film for a good while before they always have existed simultaneously since they were inception, but there's a little bit more overlap there, I think.
Oh, definitely. I think that stage to film seemed to be the most natural carryover. Like the reason I think that we continue to have stage to film adaptations is literally because you're taking a script. The idea is that you're taking a script that's already kind of made, you're adjusting it, you're adding some cinematography to it, and then you're pushing it onto the screen.
The only difference between a play and a film truly is angle of attack.
Pretty much.
A play gets one wall to view it from, whereas a film gives you more than one angle. Other than that, I mean, yes, there's production, there's live versus, but even then you can record a stage play and then produce and then release it. The biggest difference over anything else is the way it is put on. A play is seen from a single angle, and they even do live productions where they'll do a stage play and they film it from different angles. But it's still a stage play. It's still acted out in a very specific way.
Well, yeah, Waitress is a prime example of that last year, but also Hamilton.
Yes,
when it got released onto Disney.
The Lion King musical was done. They did it. They just filmed the play being done. That's different than turning it into a movie. That's not what we're talking about. An adaptation means that's literally just recording the play and then releasing it.
That's fair. So we won't be really discussing like
Well, we
Waitress.
may talk. We'll talk
probably
about it.
touch on it.
Yeah,
but-
we'll talk about it. But the main thing about like when we mean adaptation, we mean like you convert it into a film.
Right.
Mean Girls is a better example of that because it is a film.
Yeah.
So, but those are all relevant. So we'll talk about all of it.
Yeah. All right. So, starting the discussion off, what, in your opinion, makes a good stage to film adaptation? Is it the style that they're putting it on? Is it a cast? Like, is it the cast that's making it good? Or just what do you think makes a good stage to film adaptation?
Well, that's kind of vague to a point, but all of it. But the biggest thing that separate, because all of those could also fail in a movie too. Like,
Yeah.
all of those good casting, bad casting affects plays and films. But yeah, the adaptation of it, like say you cast the wrong person to play the part, could be bad. But that's anything. I think the biggest thing that separates film and play, actually more than anything else, is how you adapt it. Because plays are designed to view in a specific angle. Plays are designed for you to be sitting in the audience and watching this happen from one point of view.
Well, yeah, you have one open view.
You have one open view.
That you're projecting
Yes. So
all of the actors are projecting one way.
Yes. So all of your focus is on the stage and what's going on there.
Right.
For example, you can do a play with a single actor.
True.
They can yell at people off screen. And it's not awkward or weird because they're just off the stage. There's one called Teddy. It was like Teddy Roosevelt was doing the one main stage. It's a one man play. He just plays Roosevelt. There's several times where he speaks to other characters, but he yells to them and he's talking to them. They do this in film, like with droids or people who speak other languages. Chewbacca is a good example where they talk to him and then they translate for him. Yeah. Half translate where they'll say something to him. He speaks and then there's like, well, I know you don't want to do it. That's how you do that in a situation like that. You can do that with plays. You can do setting with plays. You can focus the audience really hardly on the set by using the set itself. Whereas in film, the camera controls what you're looking at.
Right, and it's really hard to just have one actor with a movie. You can do it.
You can do it, but it doesn't have the same feel.
Yeah.
A stage it feels different. When you're watching a stage, there's an understanding that it's just a stage. It's like you're half immersed, but you're always aware that this is a stage. In a film, the immersion can actually be higher. Right. You get caught up in it a little more because you forget that this is fake. You're starting to identify in it. And if you do it too much like a film, you don't get that immersion.
Right.
And so what in a stage play can be very engaging, and a film becomes very, very boring. A good example of this is What Happens Later. We watched the end of last year. It was a stage play. We watched the movie. The premise is very interesting. The dialogue is the most interesting thing in what's going on.
Right.
In a play, that would have made sense because there would have been these callbacks would have been. But in a film, it just makes me want to see those moments.
Right.
In a film is all show don't tell. Stage plays is. Dialogue is very important to a play because the visuals aren't as in your face.
Well, and it's a
lot of imagination.
Of the limitation.
Yes. There's still a lot of imagination going on. It's a set. There's limitations to what you're able to view. And so you're still acting a lot on your imagination. A film rips all the imagination away from you and shows you everything. So if it's going to show you everything, it needs to give you something better than what you would imagine in your head.
Right.
When we're watching What Happens Later, they're describing these things. In a play, I'd start visualizing those. In a movie, I'm expecting them to show it. I'm expecting them to show me the flashback. And they don't, and I'm confused because it's a visual medium. That's what movies do. You don't, if it's like, we wanted to keep it like the play, then it should have just stayed a play.
Well, yeah.
If you're going to adapt it to a film, you need to put film elements in, flashbacks, narrations, things that give film more depth than you do with a play.
Right.
I mean, you can narrate with a play, but narration of a play is done live over the characters. In a film, you can have narration going on while there's a scene of ducks at a pond. Can't really do that in a stage play. You can have abstract scenes in a film. What happens later, the entire thing happens in an airport. It's boring to look at.
It's boring to look at, and the other thing too is that it really is a thing of the entire time that you're watching it, they are describing a far more interesting story.
Yes.
On a play, it works very well because you're like, okay, the limitations, they're kind of stuck. We're stuck with them physically somewhere.
Yes.
With
the
film,
expectation is there.
Yeah.
You set... That I think is that's the word I want to use. I think the greatest thing that sets apart good and bad adaptations of stage play to film is the expectations that are set.
Yeah.
It's the same actually with any other medium. We talk about books and comic books. Every one of those mediums has an expectation that it sets because there are certain limitations. Written word is only written letters, so it's full imagination. So everybody's interpretation is going to be different.
Right.
Comic book is very visual. You're seeing what's being written. The dialogue is less important because they're showing everything. It's very show heavy. Plays have a mix of show and tell, a very mixed balance of show and tell.
Right.
And especially the reason why a lot of plays are also musicals, because that works really well in the medium because you're setting a tone and a story through a song. That works so well in stage, and in film. But in a film, they'll do wide camera shots, zoom outs, show people coming into the scene and leaving the scene. They'll show them running down an alleyway. Oliver.
Yeah.
Oliver is a stage play to a movie. The stage play, it's all done in the play. But in the film, it has him, the very opening scene has him in a room with all the boys, and it has a big panning shot of them all slamming you can't do that on stage. They set the expectations immediately in the film. What happens later is the complete opposite. In the very beginning, it's set up like a stage play and it acts like one immediately.
Yeah, it feels very stiff. It feels very dialogue heavy.
Very limited and very soul crushing.
Yeah, and the other thing too is that they didn't even really improve on it even with like a score or anything. What happens later is just a very bland film. It is like pristinely shot.
A lack of a score, I think, is actually way more important than we give it credit for. Because one of the things that does, very few plays have live scores.
Right.
Because they're expensive.
Well, they're expensive, but the other thing too is like with a lot of dramas, you don't want to have to bring about a live band.
Yes.
Like a pit band makes a lot of sense in a musical because it plays off of the crowd, it plays off of the musical number,
yes,
and it makes it very live and lively. When it comes to a drama,
a drama, just background music is expensive.
It's expensive, and it's also, it would really rip people out.
Yes.
Like that's the thing too. Like,
but
when
some
it comes
places
to
will do it. Like they will do it.
Well, they have like an intermission and intro and outro, but it's usually recorded.
But they didn't do it for, or they'll do pre-recordings. That's a lot of high school plays will pre-record the music from like a higher production, and they'll just play it while they sing to it. That's fine. But even then, they'll have often a lot of plays will have a score in some sense, either pre-recorded or it's rarely a live pit band, but they'll have some kind of music to it. This What Happens Later did feel really, I don't know if the original had music, but the movie not having it felt empty.
Well, the entire film just felt empty.
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing, too, is I think that a lot of dramas, when it comes to a stage play, is you really have to just throw out the fact that it's a play. You can keep most of the elements and the story elements and stuff like that, but you kind of have to throw out.
There are a lot of romantic comedies like that as films work really well, but then if you try to convert them to plays, you limit yourself a lot. So you have to be very careful how you do it. But they do work. They work well if you do them right. Legally Blonde. Yeah. I enjoy the play way more than the movie. The movie's good, but the play is a great adaptation.
Well, the play just ups the silliness.
Yes.
Like, we did that in high school. That was one of the musicals that we did when I was in high school.
Yeah, and it's hilarious, and it's fun, and it's not really a rom-com. It's more of just a general comedy.
Yeah.
But it's a good example of the medium working in reverse. film and that's an important thing to think of. We've been talking. There's a lot of films that have been turned into stage plays. You talked about Color Purple, like that was a musical adaptation of the original film.
Right.
These are things like we're having a point now where films that were turned into musicals 20 years ago are now being turned back into movies as the musical version.
Right.
An interesting premise, but that's because musicals work well both ways if you adapt them well.
Well, yeah, all you have to do.
Mean Girls was done by the same creators all the way through. So
well, yeah,
Tina Fey did all three of them.
Yeah, and the thing is that musicals do well in film because the flamboyantness works well with the camera.
Yes.
Like flamboyance in the stage works really well because you can do your set changes and stuff like that during a musical number because it's dynamic and silly and people are like, oh, okay, the walls are moving. Sure, no problem. So when it comes to like putting it on camera, it's even like bigger and you have more opportunity to do stuff.
On stage, you'll have people like moving the sets around. And you'll have like psychedelic things. And then in film, you can do so much with that.
Yeah.
And it expands upon it. Like you can do a lot more of film than you can with a stage play. Stage play is limited. But a stage play is a great place, I think, for the mind to some of the most fun things we've had in the 20th century, like in the 21st century, have come from musical stage plays. Hamilton, Legally Blonde the musical, Mean Girls, Wicked. These are things. I mean, in Wicked and Hamilton was completely original, and Wicked was an adaptation of Wizard of Oz in a very different light.
Right.
Which spawned the villain as a hero thing with like
Maleficent,
stuff like that, which is an interesting take on characters. That is fun stuff that you can get away with a little bit more because the stakes are lower.
Yeah.
And it lets you really do some fun things that can, when they go to film, could just be a blast. But Hamilton, when it was made to film, they didn't redo it. They just transposed it.
But honestly,
they may do it at some time, but I don't know if it would work.
I don't think it would, because that's the thing is like Hamilton works very, very well as a stage play. I don't know how you would film it.
I feel the same way with like Rent or there's another one I was thinking of that is like going to film just doesn't feel like it would work. I think Rent was actually done, but I've not seen it.
It has been done. It wasn't as well received as the Broadway play.
Yeah.
It kind of, if I recall right, it's kind of the same way as The Producer's Musical, which is another film that was a movie turned into a musical, turned into a film.
Yep.
But The Producers, actually, interestingly enough, had the right cast. It had a good direction. It had good shots. One of the things that it didn't carry over well was it kind of forgot it's a movie. So all of the numbers and all of the jokes and all of the things that the actors are doing because they had been on stage for so long are played off as if they were on stage.
Gotcha.
So there's a lot of dead air in The Producers. It's a guilty pleasure of mine. I love that film, but I'm not going to lie. The dead air makes it very awkward.
That's part of the problem there is I think that works well with what I was saying, like the expectations thing. Like, we seem to be in agreement. We're kind of different, like on focus of like scope, but the big thing here for both of us is that stage plays made to films, you have to be aware of the expectations of what the different mediums have.
Yeah,
because
you have to use it to the full advantage that you have.
You have to use use the tools you have. Don't just remake the stage play on a camera.
Because you can do that. You can do that, and it works. It depends on the film.
That's the problem.
Yeah, exactly. Like Hamilton works really well.
How adapted it needs to be depends entirely on the context.
Yeah.
Hamilton, you could just record. Lion King, you could just record and put on screen. And it'll be entertaining because it's upbeat. Musicals in general.
I think musicals in
general. Even dramas can do it if they are. What happens later, I think the biggest thing that hurt that one is that the content is not entertaining for film the way it was made. You had to up it. You have to upscale it. It's too bland and too simple. And it probably...
It really needed to have a second set of actors that played the part. Even if it was silent, at least show the visual of them doing what they were doing.
Yes.
because
that would have made it feel more alive. There's
exactly
the whole. That was another weird thing. The whole movie, there's other people walking around.
yeah. In the background,
but but they don't interact with anybody. There's no interactions with anybody, and whenever they do interact with a person, it's you see them from behind, and you don't actually hear them speak. If other people in the airport had spoken to them and around them, it would have felt less. It would have felt way less jarring.
Right.
You just put it on film, but you made it like a movie, and we talked about this when we reviewed it. It's technically perfect.
Yeah, all the camera shots are technically
perfect. It's just boring because all the interactions are dead. It's only interesting when the two of them are talking to each other.
Right.
And like a third of the film, they're not talking to each other. There's lots of times where they're just standing looking at stuff.
And it's just dead space.
Or he's on the phone with people that they're not interacting with. You're just hearing one side of the conversation.
Well, and they make it to where you can't hear the other side. But in movies, we're used to hearing the other side. On a stage play, it makes 100% sense. I'm not hearing the other side of the story, and they're playing it out and they're acting it out.
Even worse, though, there was a scene in that one where he leaves and comes back, and she describes to him what she said on the phone. It doesn't even show it. Yeah. She tells him what she said, and it doesn't even show her like doing it. In a movie, that's a great way to set an expectation of drama. You could see her lie. You could see her say something over the phone and then lie to him.
Yeah.
But we didn't know she lied. She had to tell us later she lied. And but we don't care because we didn't know. There's no shock or horror because...
Yeah, we just sat there and we're like, okay, that was weird that she did that.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I remember that scene. Like, we literally were just sitting there like, I think because we were the only people in the theater, all three of us were like, okay... whatever.
Yes. it doesn't have the same impact. Whereas in a play, they could off-screen stuff like that a little more. There's also a possibility they didn't translate as well. They made in a play, there's a lot of times key moments. Shakespeare does this a lot in his stuff, where there's like incredibly important dialogue moments that sets the tone for the entire play. It's for Hamlet's the to be or not to be speech.
Right.
It sets the tone for what's going on. And if you miss that, it's an allegory for the play that you're about to watch, as well as a heavy amount of foreshadowing.
Well, yeah, that's kind of a Shakespearean.
Right. Yeah. Without that setting the tone, a good chunk of the beginning is a little confusing because you're not sure what exactly the expectation of the characters are. That sets the tone. With what happens later, I imagine that her talking to off the phone with his ex, why she was gone, is a major tone setting part for the play, but for the film, it doesn't matter because you're seeing everything play out. So you need to be able to explain better what's going on. And your place setters, your major moments in film and plays are going to be different. In plays, it's foreshadowing, dialogue, set piecing is very important. In film, it's camera angles, who's talking when certain shots are being made. It's scenes where you're shooting.
Right, it's where you're shooting.
Shooting in a desert is very different than shooting on water. A stage is a stage is a stage is a stage.
Yeah.
A board of water and a board of fire has very little relevance to the visual aspect of it.
Right.
It's all up here in the head. But in a film, you got to show that stuff. You have to show it because there's an expectation in film to see it. And a good example for me is actually, you talked about early on, 1931's Dracula.
Right.
That is a stage play to a film. It's filmed like a stage play, but it still does camera stuff
exactly. Well. They transferred it to cinema. It's very limited in how they transferred it to cinema. I don't think you can get away with that.
Well, that was early enough. Cinema was still fairly new.
Well, exactly.
Anyway.
Like there's a lot you can get away with early on. I think now if you're going to take something from stage to play, you have to give it the full cinematic experience. You have to do the Sound of Music.
Or you're just gonna. You don't have to, but don't expect it to do well in a theater.
Well, yeah.
Like,
no. What I'm saying is like I think that in order for you to have a really good adaptation, a popular adaptation, you have to lean into the fact that it's a cinematic experience.
This is something I'll die on the hill of, that I fight with people who get mad about books to film all the freaking time.
Yeah.
They'll be like, this wasn't in the movie, that wasn't in the movie, they left so much out. Yeah, because a book, you can sit there and you can describe 37 side characters and their little missions in the thing and it not take up a lot of time. But in a film, you have to be specific as to what you're focusing on. The expectation is set where you're focusing on a set amount of characters and a linear story.
Well, yeah.
That films can't do what books do. They never will be able to do what books do. If you're expecting your book to be on the film, you're always going to be disappointed. Well, it has to be changed.
Well, it's kind of like Dungeons and Dragons, for instance. Dungeons and Dragons, usually the dungeon master gets like a full listing of like, this is how a character player is. This is their backstory. This is where they come from. So you can build the voice. All of that, you can't just describe to your players. And the other thing is that if they're not important enough to the story or the player's experience, sure, I have 3 pages of backstory for this barkeep. My players don't want to talk to the barkeep. They want to go to the blacksmith. That's more important to their story. That's more important. That's been viewed as more important to the whole experience. It's kind of like that with film, where the director goes and he's like, yes, this side character is really cool. He's not that important to the main plot that I've had to filter down.
Yes.
So in order for this character to get their time, this character cannot even exist.
Characters may get introduced later, or you might replace other ones. A great example of this is actually Lord of the Rings. I've seen this happen with plays a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of plays, when they get adapted, you may have a lot of characters on the screen, because play doesn't matter who they're played by. A play, anyone that can, plays are designed to be characters are designed to be a little loose on their playing style. A lot of, especially earlier plays, like Shakespearean plays, a lot of side characters can be played by almost anyone, because their
it's just a costume change.
Yep, their temperament doesn't matter. Like Hamlet matters a lot, but like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, is that their name? The two's like,
high school was a long time ago, DJ.
Those two could be played by literally anyone, because they're not key to the story and their personalities aren't fleshed out. So, and that was done on purpose. In the play, their personalities, because anyone can play them. They could be snarky, they could be silly, they could be serious. It doesn't matter. The characters will always work. Yep. Anyone can play them. In a film, that doesn't work, because you're now specifying how these characters are built. So you have to be careful who you limit. Lord of the Rings did a thing where a lot of characters, Tolkien does this thing where people pop in and out of their stories like crazy. Tom Bombadil, one off and out. They're never seen from again. That's why they cut him out of the film. People complained about it. Why would we put him in there? He doesn't show up for the rest of the books. Why would we're not going to put him in the movie? Because people won't know what he's there for. In the books, you can have little silly adventures. Those are helped character build. In the film, you can rush that because you can show their character. So you don't need those little stories to build them up as much. You can show a few scenes and really show what they're like, because you're able to see their mannerisms, their body language. You're able to read things you can't do in book.
Right.
And another character there's an elf character that saves Frodo that shows up for that and never shows up ever again. In the movie, they turned that into Arwen, because they wanted to use a character that's already there and you see later.
Yeah, you'd already introduced them.
Yes.
You wanted them to feel more important.
Yes.
It brought more importance to that character that's already recurring.
Rather than use a one-off character. That people will be, who's that guy? And then he never shows up ever again. What happened to the elf guy? No, you in movies, you're in a book, you can throw random names because you're making them up all in your. It doesn't matter. Even if it's the same person. Aragorn, you might even imagine him a different way every time you read him. You know what I mean? Like, the characters don't matter as much. It's a name. The name matters. The name is like a brand for that person in writing. In stage production, it's whoever's casted as that person, you're going to see them as that person. Right. Because they're going to enamour it, which is why a lot of times people's favorite stage adaptation is often the first version they see. Because they project those characters. It's hard to see them as other people.
Well, yeah, exactly. Like I've been to a couple of stage plays and stuff like that where I went to one that was the Murder on the Orient Express.
Oh, okay.
And I've seen the films and I've read the book, And I had no issue with the casting. I loved the casting that they had with the stage adaptation. He looks nothing like I ever imagined Pro to be. But it was easier for me to accept him than some of the film versions. The film versions, I'm like, you have the time, you have the costume, you have the you are actively casting like wide, broad.
So I said, set expectations. The audience, the more limited the medium of offering, the more the audience is leeway the audience is willing to give you on certain things.
Right.
But they'll be harsher on others. People are really harsh on dialogue and written word because it's written. How do you mess up dialogue?
Yeah. Well, you hire the people that wrote Morbius and Madam Web. That's how you mess up dialogue.
but I actually counter that very easily because written word is really good for descriptions. Dialogue is not designed for written word. No. Dialogue is designed for spoken word. So dialogue will always be a little weird in books. And especially with writing styles. It's very difficult sometimes for authors to make characters sound different. Because you're writing in a certain style and then you dialogue your characters, a lot of them will sound a little similar.
Well, yeah, they start like using the same manners and stuff like that, but it's because, the author has a voice. Like, I've had that issue with some of the stories I've written where literally I have to, like, one character in particular, I have a very specific way that they talk and they have a very awful Tennessee accent. And it's supposed to be because that character's grating. They're supposed to be grating. The issue is writing that so that people understand that, no, they actually sound awful.
That's one of those things that's harder. That's
hard on the written word.
And that's
easy if I cast somebody. I'm like, here's your line. Give me an awful Tennessee accent.
And you also get more differentials. The more people are playing parts. That's like Simpsons, where like characters will be voiced by like the same voice actor across 30 characters. You start to notice similarities and mannerisms through the characters.
Oh yeah, because Mark Hamill and stuff.
Yeah,
you can tell when Mark Hamill's playing a character.
Yes, because that, and so when they play a different character in the same show, Family Guy, where Seth MacFarlane plays like 4 of the main cast. Yep. He does a really good job of compartmentalizations, but every once in a while you'll notice similarities between the characters. It's never, you can never really fully separate them, even how talented you are. But the more you give those people their own individual voice, the more, and plays are interesting in that effect because plays will be done across the country at high schools, colleges, play centers, the same play done by thousands of different actors.
Right, and they're all different. Like I've been
You can watch the same play 3 times in a row and have an entirely different experience because the way everybody interacts is completely different.
Well, you even experienced that with the same cast.
Yes.
Like in high school and stuff like that. They're different from rehearsal to rehearsal, and then depending on the way that the audience interacts determines how the play itself plays out.
That's a lot of it too, yes.
You can't really have, like, it's like trying to catch fire in a bottle when you're putting it to film, because sometimes it's like, I went to this play and I absolutely loved it. But the thing is that you don't realize that you had a really good audience that night. So the play felt alive, but in all reality, that play really only benefited from the audience being there.
I feel the same way about films.
Yeah.
There's a lot of films that I can watch by myself, and there are ones that have to be watched with other people.
Well, like Lisa Frankenstein.
Yes.
Like you and I had very
different experiences.
We had different experiences, but we had very similar notes as far as the film. I had a very, very empty theater. You had a full theater. Or mostly full.
Yep.
And you came out there and was like, yeah, it's not a great film, but it's a riot. It was fun. Like you gave it a
fun movie.
Yeah, you gave it an 8 out of 10.
Yeah.
Whereas I had one other person who had dark humor, 2 people in the back making out. That was it. And so when stuff happens, sometimes I would laugh at something and be like,
is this actually funny or am I crazy?
Exactly. Is it funny or am I insane?
Sometimes sometimes laughter can be a response to like an emptiness. So like there's like this thing like sitcoms will have laugh tracks, right?
Yeah, people make fun of the
And people
laugh
make
tracks,
fun-
but they're
they'll,
important.
They'll take movies and put them on, or TV shows, sitcoms, and put them on YouTube without the laugh track.
And they sound
And
psychotic.
and they sound psychotic, and a lot of times like stuff that you're like, that doesn't really sound, that's not really all that funny. But a laugh track is designed, it was actually designed for people at home because they used to have live shows on radio and stuff.
Yeah.
With live audiences. Or they would produce it in front of live audience. Some do live audiences, some do laugh track. But the reason they do that is to get you to, it makes you feel like you're doing it with other people. And it is, you watch it with or without a laugh track, it's funnier. It's actually freaking funnier. Like not even like objectively funnier.
Yeah.
Because that co-laughter just makes it feel more real.
Yeah.
And it helps. And having an audience around you for plays is just epically important because it's a live performance. That's very important.
Well, and the thing is that it's very different too. Like that's part of the reason that you almost have to really when you're making a film that's based off of a stage play, you probably have to get your entire team together, no matter who you've cast, and just be like, listen, we're making a movie. It has the same name. It has the same story. This is a very, very different thing.
Yes.
Because when you try to make it too much like the play, it's just jarring. Like Dear Evan Hansen had the actors from the stage play, but it came off as creepy. It came off as ungenuine. It came off as insane because the main actor, yes, he had played Evan Hansen for years, beloved for his portrayal. When he got onto film, people were like, that dude is 40. He does not look like a teenager. And he was still emoting to a fake audience beyond the camera. So people were like, he looks insane.
He was doing it like a stage play still. That's another thing.
Yeah.
Cats has to be my most like best example of this I could come up with. Is plays to films failing because of a very different reason than expectations. And that's because the medium doesn't work the same.
Right.
Because of the suspension of disbelief. People on stage wearing cat suits
You're like,
is
oh yeah,
silly,
it's a cat.
but you buy it.
Yeah.
In film, when they do it with the CGI stuff, it's creepy and weird. But even when they did it,
Nightmare fuel.
when they did the older one, when they did it with the cat suits, on a stage, there's a distance to you. Even when you're the closest seat to the stage, you don't see these people super up close. You're seeing...
always at least 15 feet.
Yes.
It's always at least 15.
I went and watched, at Silver Dollar City, they have a Christmas Carol play.
Yeah.
And I went and watched that live, and I was sitting in the front row, and these guys were like, the stage was about 10, 15 feet from me.
Yeah.
When Scrooge stood at the front of the stage, I could see his face clearly.
Mm-hmm.
But pretty much anywhere else, no.
Yeah.
And so he could have played a teenager, and I would have bought it because he was 30 feet away at times at the back of the stage.
Yeah.
Works fine. On a film, the camera's in your face. You can't be 40 playing a teenager. It will not work. This is a problem like Saved by the Bell. They all look like adults in the show because they are.
Yeah.
Power Rangers, they're adults. They're 20, 25, 30 years old playing teenagers. It doesn't work. It's kids kind of buy it because all older kids look older to them. They can't tell the difference.
Oh, yeah.
But but as an adult, if you're trying to make this for adults, they're gonna notice these don't look like teenagers.
Well, I think it's a thing too of like once you get to that age, that's when you start being like, oh no, that's not.
Yes.
Because like
When you're
literally
8, a 15-year-old and a 30-year-old all look older than you. But when you're 15, a 30-year-old doesn't look like a 15-year-old anymor.
Yeah, because you're like, if that dude is sitting next to me in class, I'm calling the cops.
Yes.
That is a man.
That is, but like cats, that is a very big thing. That's another big thing that plays. That's a limitation of your medium. You can't have a 40-year-old actor play a teenager in a film. It won't work. The suspension of disbelief doesn't work. But on a stage play, you can get away with it because there's distance. There's
distance and people accept the makeup, and they also it's the the limited scope of the casting.
Yes.
Like I said, you accept a lot of differentiation just because of the limitation of casting.
Yes.
Like the Ghost of Christmas Present is played by some 5'2" dude in like a Christmas Carol. You can accept that. You can be like, he's 5'2", but they got the costume right. He's got the voice and he's playing it well. You don't need like a 7-foot tall guy playing it. But if you did it on camera, Ghost of Christmas Present has to be huge.
On that Silver Dollar City one that we watched, Christmas Present was played by like this lady that was just like hilarious. She was like very flamboyant and like joke. She was a jokester and a prankster and fun. Yeah. And she's goofy and she's doing physical gags and it worked. She's like she's like way shorter than Scrooge. But they do these moments. A lot of her, when she's close to him, she's standing up on stairs. So she looks like imposing to him, even though she's goofy. It's really fun. They did a really good job of it. That's stuff you do with the stage play.
Yeah, exactly.
In a film,
you can pull it off.
In a film, if you want to make someone look taller, you just film it higher or take a different camera angle. Like, there's different ways you can do things in the different mediums. There's different tools at your disposal. Use them appropriately, and you'll do much better. You just gotta be careful how you use the tools. I think that's the biggest thing to take away from it.
Yeah, exactly. It's understanding your tools, understanding your toolbox, and utilizing it properly.
Yep, and setting the proper expectations.
Absolutely. And the thing is that with film, there's just higher expectations than on stage. On stage, you can get away with a lot of the things that you just can't on film.
Yes.
But at the same time, you have unlimited possibility with film, so you have to utilize the fact that you have unlimited possibility with film.
I think that's actually part of what hurts film in general. Is it's so broad, it's too broad, because people I think struggle what to adapt. Well, we can adapt everything. What do we want to keep? And no matter what they keep or take or leave out, somebody gets upset.
There will always be one character. There will always be one song. There will always be one sing where you're just like, man, I wish they had kept that. Yeah. Like the producers, for instance, there's a scene where before the Unhappy song, where literally they have a guy who sings like a soul song, like that they're literally like wage slaves, and it's hilarious on the stage. And then they cut it from the film, and it's just like, okay, I can see why they cut it. It's just
another thing that they'll do, and this is where I'll end on, because it is kind of important, but it's kind of a throwaway at the end. Is a lot of times when you take stage adaptations to films, they'll change the order of things, events or songs, because in a film they work better. Like in a play, they may start out with him as a kid, but in a movie they may start him as an adult and then do a flashback instead. Yeah. Another good example of this is The Sound of Music. The song placements are changed in the film. The yodeling song is the song that she sings for the kids to calm them down in the storm. Favorite Things is actually sung to Maria when she's leaving leaving there, because this is a musical. The musical numbers are there's more. They cut some of the music from the play and then restructured where they take place.
Okay.
But there's a bit of that where they change it. That whole scene with the bobbleheads thing is only in the film. The little puppets, that's in the film. That's not from the play. But that was used for the Goat Herder song because they didn't know where to put it.
But it's a fun song.
It's a fun.
That's one of the examples of them taking film and using it properly.
Yes.
They knew, they were like, hey, we can actually do a little puppet show and zoom in on it. Right. It's a super fun happy song.
In the play, they sing. There's actually a couple of songs that the kids sing to like everybody to show their talent, but they do the bobblehead one. They did the Goat Herder one instead. Mm-hmm. And then there's sometimes the ones will be reprises that they cut the reprises and only do it once, or they add a reprisal. Those are things you can do from film to that makes sense in certain moments. Hey, this film shows this. We don't need the reprisal. It doesn't work in this film.
Well, yeah, like changing the introduction and stuff like that. Like, for instance, with Sweeney Todd, opening it up with a big, grandiose musical overture on stage makes sense. The way that they did it for the film adaptation makes perfect sense. It's a cinematic opening. It is introducing the character through dialogue. It is introducing a lot of things through dialogue and then moving into the second song as the introduction song. Because in a film, you don't need an overture that's introducing your entire cast of characters.
Right. Like that goes back to your D&D thing.
Yeah.
You backdrop characters when you need to, but you don't have to for everybody. Film shows. Film is a show don't tell. So because it's a showy medium, you don't have to do your overtures. You don't have to do big explainers. I think that's part of the problem I've also seen with film adaptations is they'll leave that stuff in while they're showing it. They'll have a narration ones I've seen do this, where they narrate what's happening while showing it to you. You don't need the narrator anymore. The narrator was there to set the tone. What is he doing here? He's not setting a tone. George of the Jungle has a narrator. It works because the narrator is a character in the movie.
Right.
Narrators work in film when they're a character.
Yes.
You don't need a narrator explaining things unless you're explaining thoughts. Wonder Years did that well because he's explaining what he's thinking. It's a way of projecting thoughts on a character in a visual medium.
Yeah.
It's clever. But he's not narrating what's happening. He's narrating what the character's thinking while you're watching what's happening. So you're having a visual and a play medium happening simultaneously at the same time. That's a great way to use those kind of things.
Yeah.
Doesn't work well if you try to narrate. But if Wonder Years, he'd sat there narrating what's happening while it's happening. Like, why are we narrating this? That's like a radio show that you're telling me what's happening while it's happening. Stop. That's I've seen done a lot with play to film is they leave elements in that were done for the play because they needed to be there and they left them in the film when they just could have been pulled out.
Yeah.
Just be careful. Like be careful what you take.
Yeah. All right. I think we've had a pretty decent discussion. Really quickly, DJ, is there any particular play that you've seen that you wish was on film or that you personally would try to conquer with a film adaptation?
Legally Blonde, the musical, I would like to see made into a film. I actually would have liked that one when I found out Mean Girls was being done into a film because that's another one that's movie to play to film.
Yeah.
If it does go that way, I would like to see that's one. Another one I'd really like to see done well is Lord of the Rings. There have been some play adaptations of it, but none of them have been done very well. There was a really big British production that did one, but they butchered it. They left Tom Bombadil in, which is a mistake to do in a visual medium. It doesn't work. And they, the elf character that takes Frodo, they didn't use the one from the book or Arwen. They created an original character that disappears. So everybody's confused. Book moviegoers and the play people. Nobody knows what's going on.
Jeez.
Yes. But that, I would love to see a good stage adaptation of the Lord of the Rings, a musical adaptation of Lord of the Rings. Especially because there's songs all throughout the Lord of the Rings that fit it. That's one. Those are a couple. There have been others in the past I've thought of, but a lot of them have been done. That I've wanted to be done. Or already are. Like most of my favorite musical stage plays are musical adaptations that have been made into films already or have had a movie version of it. Sound of Music, The King and I, those are some of my favorites. I love Oklahoma. Those are all stage plays that got made into films already, long time ago. So the greats, and they've already been done. So
right.
I'm trying to think of more the modern stuff. Star Wars, actually, I think would make a really good musical.
It could be fun.
It's high drama.
Yeah.
Especially the second one, Empire, just the moments between Luke and Vader, and being able to see Vader internal monologue in a musical fashion would be epic, I think. But it'd be very difficult, I think, to pull off in a way that wouldn't be silly if you don't do it well.
That's fair.
Because Darth Vader, think Scar from The Lion King, his villain song. Yeah. Think something like that for Vader. Him singing in a deep voice, talking about conquering the universe, and that he's going to be... It would be serious. You wouldn't laugh at it. You'd be like, holy crap, that's deep. Darth Vader coming up and being like, I will conquer the universe to save it,
Yeah, the majority of your comedic characters would be background characters. You would have a musical number for Greedo that literally ended with him getting shot.
Yeah.
You know, like something like that. That'd be fun.
But I would actually like to see Star Wars made into a serious drama. People have done comedic takes on it, which are fun and they're funny.
Yeah.
But I'd like to see it done seriously, like the film done with like serious aspects, but as a musical, like a dark musical comedy.
It could be interesting.
That would be really fun, I think, because it's like, I just want to see Darth Vader like sing like really dark, like evil music song. Like I said, think The Lion King. That's not a comedy.
No.
That's not a funny movie. It has little silly moments, but it's a serious drama, but it's a musical.
Yeah.
And that wouldn't work. The Lion King does it. And Lion King did a really good job of making a kids film serious while animated cartoon lions sing serious. But it's like the songs are fun. Like the songs are silly and fun, but everything outside of the music is serious.
Yeah.
Almost the entire movie is serious. Really somber to the first half.
Well, no, it's
like
somber.
Simba growing up. It's really somber, really serious tone. Then Mufasa dies, and then the break in the middle of the film is Timon and Pumbaa, which is funny and silly, and then it's serious again for the rest of the film.
Yeah, and it mixes.
Take that tone and put it to Star Wars. I think would work fantastically.
Yeah, good.
That's me.
All right, I think like as far as like stage to film, I agree with you. The Legally Blonde musical I think is really fun. It could play very well. The other thing is that the musical is a little bit more modernized than the film is.
Yes.
So it would be relevant. It has an important message.
That's another thing about plays is they're technically timeless because you can adapt the play a little bit to the time.
Yeah.
Like the cell phones. This is a thing comics dealt with, where like a single like page of a comic could span an entire year of comics. Could be like a month in comic time.
Yeah.
So 10 years goes by, technology changes, and Batman it's only been a year for Batman, but he's got a cell phone now. It's different. Sliding time is kind of weird like that with plays as well.
Yeah.
Films kind of you said something earlier. It's like catching lightning in a bottle, fire in a bottle.
Yeah.
That you're trying to capture the essence of a changing medium and freeze it in time. And some things are timeless.
Right.
But not everything is, and that can be difficult sometimes.
Yeah, certainly. One of the other films, like, it's already been made into a film, but I'd be curious to see it modernized and brought into a film again, would probably be, like, Sweet Charity. Because it has, like, a lot of, like, 1960s specific themes and stuff like that. So,
Sweet Charity?
Yeah. That could be interesting. I think that it would be interesting to see what somebody could do with that material.
Okay.
So, I'd say something like that. I'm not like the aficionado on plays necessarily. I need to get more into actual theaters as compared to movie theaters, I think.
I did a lot of plays when I was younger. I haven't done very many more recently, but I've seen a lot of plays.
Which sucks because actually, like, in the town that we live in, there's great plays. Like, there's great theaters and stuff like that, so...
We're going to go see the Cinderella ballet, I think.
Ooh.
So it's going to be fun.
There you go.
Ballet's ballet and as an afterthought as we're closing out. That's another thing. There's also ballets and like opera, which are similar to stage plays but different in their medium.
Yeah.
Those are also things that can be adapted that follow the exact same things. Be very careful what you adapt and how, because these things have a medium. Operas are like heavily sung, and ballets are interpretive dance and showed.
Yeah.
These things don't work well in film unless you do something. That's why the Nutcracker, I think, has suffered from like multiple, and the Swan Princess, lots and lots of aberration weirdness, because there's a very different medium. So that was just something to close out on.
Yeah.
While we were talking about that.
Yeah. I don't think there's enough in there for like a full podcast.
No.
We are discussing ballet.
It was just an afterthought, specifically because the Nutcracker is like one of the most popular ballets ever written, and its film adaptations are all over the place.
Yeah, and they usually
because it's so loose in the production. There's like 50 versions of the film and TV shows and series of it, with different interpretations, and they all work actually very fun. Some are bad, some are good, but they're all over the place because it's a loose interpretation. It's just something interesting.
Yeah. Speaking of things that are interesting, if you found this podcast interesting, be sure to let us know by leaving us a like. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, if there are the option for comments below, unless you are on Spotify, in which case check us out on YouTube at Entertainment Rebooted. Otherwise, you can find us on Facebook at Entertainment Rebooted. We do box office recaps as well as different articles and things like that. We try to keep our ear to the entertainment world and keep you guys informed as much as possible. So, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you guys in the next video.
All right.